All right. Welcome back again. Um, Today, our lesson is going to be based on trigonometric functions. All right. So basically, what functions are? So basically, when we talk about a function, it's a type of what, or it's a special type of what, a relation, type of what, a relation. So in here, we're going to talk about trigonometric what functions, and we're saying that trigonometric functions relate an angle in a right angle triangle to the ratio of the lengths of any two sides. So how in here we're going to talk about how it relates uh, an angle to what the right angle triangle, the ratio of this length. So in a right angle triangle, the angle in there, how it relates to the ratio of other two sides, either the hypotenuse, either the adjacent, either the opposite. All right. So under this subtopic, we will learn how to find the signs of trigonometry ratio in each of the four quadrants. All right. So how do we know whether when you move from the first quadrant, you have maybe the signs of the trigonometric ratios, will it be negative or positive? That's what we are going to look at in here. So we are going to make use of the Cartesian coordinate plane, the xy plane, and the x and the y divide the coordinates. It divides the coordinate plane into four parts, with each called what, quadrant. So this axis, it divides what, the Cartesian plane into what, four regions, and each of them is called what, quadrant. So this is how it looks like. So this, we have the y-axis being the vertical axis, then we have the x-axis being the horizontal axis. Now these two divide this one into what, four regions, and each of them is called what, quadrant. It is called quadrant. All right. So this is the first quadrant. This is the second quadrant. This is the third quadrant, and this is what, the fourth quadrant. All right. So the first one here, how do we now, if we have a plane like this side of the y-axis is the positive side, and this is also the positive side of the x-axis. We have the negative side as shown here, then we have also the negative side of the y-axis as also shown here. So this is negative, this is positive, this is negative, this is positive. Now if we are to identify a point or a coordinate on this plane, where it is being found, let's say this point xy here, we have point 2, let's say 2 and 3. Where will you find this point? Now since we have xy, this is positive, this is also positive, so we find it in what, the first quadrant. So in the first quadrant, we have x being positive and also y being also what, positive. Now in the second quadrant, the x coordinate is negative. Now you look at it from this side, this is the negative side of the x-axis. So from here, it is what, negative. So that makes what, the x coordinate being what, negative, and we have y being what, positive. Now when we move to the third quadrant, all of them, both x and y are all what, they are all negative. Now when we move to the fourth quadrant, Now it falls under the x-axis here is what? Positive. Then we have the y being what? Negative. All right. So that is that for the Cartesian plane. So let's go through this as I just explained. All points in the first quadrant will have positive values for both x and y coordinates. In the second quadrant, the x coordinates are negative and the y coordinates are positive. In the third quadrant, so the third quadrant will have negative values for both x and what? Y. So here you can see that we have the coordinate being negative, negative. All right. Then in the fourth quadrant, so the x coordinate of the point in the fourth quadrant are positive, and that of the corresponding y coordinate are what? Negative. Yes. So let's note that one. Okay. Now we want to know, taking the trigonometric ratios that we talked about in our previous video, the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. The sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Okay. Now, where they fall, we want to know their sign when they fall on the first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, or fourth quadrant. What will be the sign? It is going to be negative or positive. All right. So with the aid of this Cartesian plane, we can easily identify that one. All right. So let's consider the first quadrant. Now, okay. So in here, we have the Cartesian plane. This side, the first quadrant, we have x being positive, y being positive, as we discussed earlier. Now, we are going to draw a line from this point. So we have a point here, x, y. Now we join from here to the origin. Now from this point to this point, so you see that we are going to form a type of a triangle, and this is clearly showing us what? A right angled triangle, because of this angle here. This is measured 90 degrees. So let's measure this length y, and this what? X. We place an angle here, theta. Then let this distance be what? R. Remember, we are on the first quadrant. Now, when we consider the sine, we said that the sine is equal to what? So the sine of this angle here will be equal to opposite on what? Hypotenuse. Opposite on what? Hypotenuse. Opposite on. So in here, the angle is here, so it faces this side. So this is the opposite, and this is the hypotenuse. So the longest side, which is facing the right angle side, is the hypotenuse. So this is going to be y on what? R. And you can see clearly that this distance, this is on what? They are all in the first quadrant. So you can see that this is going to be what? A positive what? Side, or a positive ratio. So sine here will be what? Y on what? R. So it is positive. So meaning that in the first quadrant, sine is what? Positive. Now when we go for cos, we have cos. So let's use this. So SOHCAHTOA. This will help us to easily record the ratios. And okay. Now, this is sine, opposite on hypotenuse. This is cos, adjacent on what? Hypotenuse. So adjacent. In here we have the angle here. Its adjacent side is the x. Then the hypotenuse is r. So x on r. And this is on the positive side of the x-axis. So we're going to get positive x on what? R. So this is going to be x on R, which is also what? Positive. This is also what? Positive. So in the first quadrant, we have sine and cos being what? Positive. Now the next one, we have tan. Tan of this angle, opposite on adjacent. Opposite is what? Y, divided by the adjacent, which is what? X. And these are all what? Positive. This is the positive side of the y-axis, positive side of the x-axis. So we have y on x also being what? Positive. So all ratios are positive in the first quadrant. All ratios are positive in the first quadrant. Alright. Now let's consider the second quadrant. So in the second quadrant, we have, let's use the point negative xy. Now in the second quadrant, we said that the x coordinate is what? Negative, and we have the y coordinate being positive. So we are going to consider this. So when you consider, we have an angle here with our y and x here. Remember, this side is negative. So when we consider sine, sine is opposite on hypotenuse. Opposite on hypotenuse. So let me write it again here for us to use it to work. So ka to. Okay, so the sine, we have sine being what? Opposite on hypotenuse. So the angle is here. If opposite is y, then the hypotenuse is r. So we have y on r. But this side is the positive side. So it means that sine is positive in the second quadrant. In the second quadrant. Now let's go for cos. Now when we look at cos, we have adjacent on hypotenuse. So the adjacent side is what? Negative x. Then hypotenuse is what? R. So we have negative x on what? R. This negative indicate that it is on the negative side of the x-axis. So in here we have cos being what? Negative. So in the second quadrant, cos is negative. Now let's go for tan. Tan is opposite on what? Adjacent. Opposite y on adjacent, which is negative x. Then we have negative y on x, which is also what? Negative. So in the second quadrant, only sine is positive. Only sine is what? Positive. And of course, it's reciprocal. Only sine is what? Positive. Now, to the third quadrant. The third quadrant. We will now in the third quadrant we know that the x and the y coordinates are all negative. So we have the point negative x, negative y. And let's repeat the same steps to answer this the same thing that we did for the previous one. So we looked at the first quadrant and we said that all the sign for all the trig ratios are what? Positive in the first quadrant. Now when you move to the second quadrant, only sine is positive. Now let's move to the third quadrant. Now to the third quadrant, this is the angle. We have negative x and also negative y here. Now to consider sine, so let's write our SOHCAHTOA here to help us identify it easily. So ka. Toa. Alright, so in here, sine opposite on hypotenuse. Opposite on hypotenuse. Now angle is here, its opposite is what? Y, but it is at the negative side. So you have negative y divided by the hypotenuse, which is what? R. So in here sine is negative. So we have y on R be negative. Now the cos, ka, adjacent on hypotenuse. Adjacent of this angle is what? Negative x here. divided by the hypotenuse r, which is also what? Also r. So we have this here, we have negative, being negative x on r. So the sine and the cos, they are all what? Negative, negative. Sine and cos, they are all what? Negative, negative in the third quadrant. Now let's move to the tan, which is in now tan is opposite on adjacent. Opposite on adjacent, they are all negative, negative. So you have y divided by x. So this is going to give us a positive value. So you have tan being positive. So in the third quadrant, only tan is what? Positive. So let's look at it from the first quadrant. We said that in the first quadrant, we identified that all the signs are what? All the trig ratios, they are all positive. Now in the second quadrant, we have only sine being positive, and of course its reciprocal. Then also in the third quadrant, we have only tan being positive, and of course its reciprocal, which is the cotangent. All right, now let's go for the fourth quadrant. Now in the fourth quadrant, for the fourth quadrant, we will use this x and negative y, because when you look at it, when false here, the x side is positive and y is what? At the negative side. So let's repeat the same steps easily. So with our SOHCAHTOA again, with our SOHCAHTOA, sorry, they're supposed to be S. So with our SOHCAHTOA, all right, so let's go. We have sine, we have the angle here, it is facing this side, so this is going to be the opposite. Then the adjacent is here, we have the hypotenuse here. All right, so let's see. Sine is equal to opposite on hypotenuse. Opposite on hypotenuse, so we have negative y on r, which is definitely what? Negative. So sine is negative in the fourth quadrant. Now let's go for cos. K, which is adjacent on the hypotenuse. Adjacent is x, and the hypotenuse is what? R. X here is at the positive side, so we have a positive value. So cos is what? Positive in the fourth quadrant. Now to the tan. Tan is opposite on adjacent. Opposite on adjacent, so we have a negative value. So we have negative y on x, which is also what? Negative. So in the fourth quadrant, only cos is what? Positive. Only cos is what? Positive. Only cos is positive. All right, so that is that. So in the first quadrant, we have all the trig ratios being positive. In the second quadrant, only sine being positive. In the third quadrant, sorry, we have only tan being positive, and in the fourth quadrant, cos being what? Positive. Thank you for watching.